You're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We're here on the unceded traditional territory of the Salish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. This is Bernadine Fox, here with my co-host for the week, Glenn Grigg, bringing you Both Sides Now. So we're here today with Rina, Liddle from Liddle Works Indie Media, and with Genieve Morison, who is with Empowered Living, and she is a transformational behavioral coach. Did I say that right?
Transformational coach.
And you work with folks who are healing from post-concussion syndrome, and we're going to get into that in the middle. And Rina is here because you have experienced a traumatic brain injury.
Yes,
right?
I have.
Can you tell us a little bit about what happened? What was going on that you ended up with this injury?
I was on my way to see a client by bike. I was on a bike route on 10th Avenue at Oak Street, and a car turned left into me. So I had a literal head-on collision.
What happened after that?
Well, actually, because I was so close to the hospital, which was quite convenient, there was an off-duty paramedic, and she was right there, and I was about to get up and get back on my bike and pedal off.
Right.
And she was like, no, you're staying here. And, they have a cyclist protocol, so they put me through that, which is a series of tests. And the concussion didn't show up at first. And then my parents came and we went out for dinner, and I went to the washroom at the restaurant and fell over to the right when I was walking. And I was wobbly. I was weaving like a drunk person does.
Right.
And I really still thought that was just because of the painkillers. And then I went home with my folks for a couple of days. I went out for lunch with my friends 5 days later, and my friend said to me, no, you got to go back to the doctor. There's something really wrong with you. I couldn't walk in a straight line.
Right.
I was stuttering. I couldn't remember the words right.
And that's not uncommon, right, Genieve, that somebody can have a head injury and that it doesn't really show up for a few days, even maybe a week or so, right?
A lot of the time, people are unfamiliar with the symptoms associated with concussion. Your brain is vulnerable, injured, and you're foggy and really confused at that moment. So the hospital misdiagnoses them without a concussion.
Did they send you home with any information about head injuries or...
No, they did not. At least not that I remember. But as Genieve was saying, it's really you kind of lose your ability to be self-reflexive.
Yes,
you're cognitively impaired.
You are. And the
that's
reason
actually,
for that is because your brain has literally slammed against the inside of your skull. It's bruised and injured. So one of the things I want to talk about is how brain injury impacts on our mental health. Yes, we wobble and there's all kinds of things that happen, but I think there's a real serious impact that happens to how we're able to cope in the world. And so, Rina, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I was actually in a really lucky place in some ways because I had just about 5 years before that had been diagnosed with ADD. So a lot of the tools in the toolkit for concussion are quite similar.
Right.
So I learned how to do things like for short durations with low intensity and getting lots of rest and making sure that all that was organized.
And this is Glenn. I'm just chiming in because one of the things we brought in the conversation is how your brain's functioning at the time. And you were saying that you had a syndrome called attention deficit disorder. And just for our listeners, I'm going to throw in that I think a good way to think about attention deficit disorder is we have focused attention and scanning attention. And in attention deficit disorder, your scanning attention is so much stronger than your focused attention. It's hard to stay with one thing. Is that kind of a fair description?
Yeah, exactly. Everything has the same level of intensity, but all of a sudden the background noise had equal importance in my brain as to everything else, which meant that I was completely overwhelmed a lot of the times. Even movement, so it wasn't just sound, it was movement.
So I think a lot of the time when we are healing from a concussion and or in post-concussion phase, we lose our identity. We lose who we are. Yeah. And so coming from my background, I've also experienced a series of 5 concussions, and I have a background in contemporary ballet, jazz dance, and I was actually forced to quit doing that because I wasn't able to move how I wanted to. It was too quick of motion. So I lost my identity because, well, at this point, I was no longer a dancer. Yeah. And so that really affected my mental health. And I went into a pretty deep depression, as well as I have seen that with many of my clients. It is isolating, and it actually brings you into that place of loneliness. And I think it's really important to start talking about this in relation to brain injuries, because it's something that I think is really missing in the healing realm of things.
Did you lose your social sphere at the same time as losing your work?
Absolutely. So I also, not even just within my dancer friends, but also with my other friends, they actually just kind of started passing me by because they invited me out lots of times. But at that point, I had to say no to most things because I wasn't able to be in a larger group of people. And so they just, it's nothing against them as human beings. No. It's the fact that they are living their life and I no longer fit into that.
I had a similar experience because I did a lot of the people that I associated with were in what's called participatory practice. And that meant that you get people involved in your art. And a lot of the theory around that is about forming community. And of course, when I was hit, all of a sudden my community stopped coming around. So I was kind of really, the irony was not lost on me, I have to say. So the community that came out to support me the most were from my networking group, actually.
And I think also people don't understand, so to give a little bit of leeway for folks, if you've known somebody and they've had an accident and then they've changed, it changes the nature of their relationship. And not everybody is aware of how to navigate that change. Like I know when I had a head injury relatively early on, I had memory difficulties. And so I always wondered whether or not I was forgetting something and people just didn't know how to say, you just talked about that.
That was the worst thing, was I had a lot of social anxiety because I couldn't remember if I knew people or not. So this poor guy came to my home. I was giving away some books and he came to my place and I was certain that I had never met him before. And yet when I answered the door, his voice was super familiar and I had to ask, do I know you? You know? And the same thing, I was out and about and at this restaurant, ran into a friend that I knew quite well and I couldn't remember who she was. I just knew that I knew her, but I had no recollection.
So we need to develop a language for people who have had injuries so that we can navigate these awkward kind of situations. Glenn, you want to say something?
I'm really appreciating that. 2 really powerful learnings so far, and I want to get you to expand on this because, first of all, you've had a brain injury, and that changes how you process information. And then you both pointed out that how we process information changes all the time anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard to notice it from the inside. So I think one of the first things you said is tell other people.
Yeah. I've
had a brain injury, and we were both talking about how if you had a broken leg and somebody called you up and said, let's go skiing, you say, I broke my leg, I can't go skiing now, but it doesn't mean that I need to be socially isolated. How do we tell people, I've had an injury to an important organ system, and I'm healing from brain trauma. Don't isolate me, but I can't go for that event because it doesn't fit in for me.
Here's the kicker. The thing that really got to me the most was, after a few months, people would start parroting back to me this idea that we manifest our reality. And what I'm doing is reminding them that I'm not there yet. I'm still not there, but I will be, or I hope to be. And but the number of people that would tell me, maybe if you stop talking about this as part of your identity, it would no longer be part of your identity. Yes. And I understood what they were getting at, and I appreciate that. But at the same time, it was silencing in a way, because if I can't talk about it with you, then I can't express any of my suffering at this moment, which means that I just would rather not see you.
Well, they're also
Re-
saying to you that it's not real.
Yeah.
Right.
What you're having to assert to people is it's a physiological injury that requires a psychological adaptation, and both are real. And Janine, you really picked up on that. Do you want to carry the ball from there?
So the way that I work with my clients is I really help with that. I help with the self-advocacy of post-concussion syndrome because it is such a difficult thing and hard to understand within yourself, as well as hard to understand it because you're in it. And having somebody who is outside of what you're experiencing help you develop the words to be able to come up with to clearly communicate the support that you need and who you need it from. And it's important not to hold on to it as tightly. You are not just your concussion, your post-concussion is what you're experiencing, but you are so much more than just your concussion all the way through.
I've gotta keep the calm before the storm. I don't want less, I don't want more. Must bar the windows and the doors to keep me safe, to keep me warm. Yeah, my life is what I'm fighting for. Can't part the sea, can't reach the shore. And my voice becomes the driving force. I won't let this pull me overboard. God, keep my head above water, don't let me drown. It gets harder, I'll meet you there at the altar as I fall down to my knees. Don't let me drown, drown, drown. Don't let me drown. So pull me up from down below, 'cause I'm underneath the undertow. Come dry me off and hold me close. I need you now, I need you most. God, keep my head above water, don't let me drown. It gets harder, I'll meet you there at the altar as I fall down to my knees. Don't let me drown, drown, drown. Don't let me drown. Don't let me drown, drown, drown. And keep my head above water, above water. And I can't see in the stormy weather. I can't seem to keep it all together. And I can't swim the ocean like this forever. And I can't breathe. God, keep my head above water. I lose my breath at the bottom. Come rescue me. I'll be waiting. I'm too young to fall asleep. So God, keep my head above water. Don't let me drown. It gets harder. I'll meet you there at the altar as I fall down to my knees. Don't let me drown. Don't let me drown. Don't let me drown. And keep my head above water, above water.
Wow, love that song. It's by Avril Lavigne called Head Above Water, and it's about her struggle with lupus. So let's get back to our conversation with Rina Liddle and Genieve Morison about TBIs, traumatic brain injuries. And of course, what we're talking about here is not the severe head injury that leaves people with real difficulties around coordination or talking, or, you know, we're talking about something that's more mild to moderate brain injuries that are much more invisible in terms of their presentation.
However, I do still think that it is really important for that person who is going through a more traumatic experience with their brain injury, because I think that if we really focus on the mindset surrounding our injury, we are more likely to have a
Resilience.
yeah, that's a great way of
That's
saying
a
it.
good word.
Yeah.
To be able to live.
Yes.
Right? And so I think no matter how traumatic the brain injury is, changing the mindset surrounding it is one of the most important things to start with, as well as all the physical sides of things.
What strikes me as so helpful about this is you really guided us about saying, yeah, I've had a traumatic brain injury, so include that. It has some effects, so permit yourself and everybody else to know that, but don't let it become who you are. You're still you, and keep that. Sounded like that was just resonating with you.
Yeah, I think one of the people that I came across in early days of my head injury was, I forgot her name, but she developed the game called Super Better. She had suffered from a concussion. She was a gamer. She went into depression, which is quite common for people with concussion. And she had 4 categories that she organized life in, according to social, spiritual, physical, and I think it's mental. And so she had gamified and given different tasks you could take to fulfill those days. And so even if you had a day where you had to lie in bed all day, which there were so many for me of those days, you could still drink 8 glasses of water and get points. You had agency. That's what it gave me, was agency.
Janine, you've also talked about just all these forces that tend to isolate people, especially who have a hidden disability or a hidden injury. And can you talk a little bit more about the connection to that and other mental health issues like depression, like anxiety, like social phobias?
Yeah, so a lot of the time we talked about the overwhelm that happens when we go into social settings. So when we have a concussion or are in this healing phase, we are overwhelmed by all the stimulus that is happening around us, by the multiple conversations that are happening, by the overstimulating lights. There's probably music playing in the background. There's a lot of things happening, and our brain actually doesn't have the ability to tune those things out anymore. We are overstimulated all the time, and so that can become really overwhelming. And if you've experienced that one time after your concussion, you're less likely to have the want or the need to go back out into those social settings again, because it caused you pain that first time. And so then you can be hesitant to be going back out and doing more things. However, it is really important to gradually be getting yourself back to these things when you are in this healing phase, because it is harder to get back into life when you are isolating yourself to a point of being in a dark room with no stimulus until your symptoms are gone. Well, the moment you go back into life and the world, your symptoms will come back.
Could this cause social anxiety then?
Absolutely. Yes.
So the other thing that's happening as you're talking is I have grandchildren with ADHD and neurological deficit disorder, and a lot of these things seem to also apply there, which kind of makes sense because we're talking about the brain and injuries to the brain, and so I'm just wondering if there has been any studies that show a correlation between brain injuries to things that we kind of get born with that also cause some of the same symptoms.
I do notice an overlap with some of my clients, as well as some of my clients that have ADD and a concussion, a head injury. So I think there are a lot of similar, like Rina said, a lot of the different tools and techniques that people are given for ADD and ADHD are some of the similar tools and techniques that people who are healing from a concussion do receive as well. So there are some overlaps,
I'm not an expert in this area, but one of the studies that came my way just a few years ago was a look in New York at the medical histories of the kids that they had in the juvenile detention center, they found 100% of those children had traumatic brain injuries in their history.
Really?
Wow.
And that was a wake-up call. And what we know about urban life, talk about cycling and a bicycle, stairways and bathtubs statistically are just really rough places to be around.
Yeah.
And so brain care is a really important part of looking after ourselves and get it looked after. And again, I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but another thing to remember is many of the symptoms are delayed because our brains are so adaptive. Your brain is wired to keep you alive under extreme circumstances, but the repair work comes later, so watch for that. It's just sort of a public service announcement about how wise the advice we're getting here today is.
Yeah, and for others too. So if everyone had more knowledge around traumatic brain injury, mild traumatic brain injury, we could advocate for ourselves if it ever happens, but also advocate for those who we love in our lives.
Okay, well, thank you, Genieve, for coming in and talking with us, and Rina for coming in and sharing your story. I really appreciate it. I think that this is an important issue for us to think about in terms of our collective mental health.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
You're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio 100.5 CFRO. We are a non-commercial station bringing you voices and stories and perspectives you probably won't hear elsewhere. We are supported by members and by donations. You can become a member by going to our website at www.coopradio.org. If you like what you hear but don't want to be a member, that's cool too. You can still help by clicking on the donate arrow at the top right of the website. Co-op Radio thanks you for listening and for helping build our community of listeners and programmers.
We're here with a responder from TAL, the Therapist Exploitation Link Line, again to go over what healthy boundaries in therapy look like and what they shouldn't be. And today, I'm hoping to talk about gifts. So hello.
Hi.
So one of the things that happens, it can happen and shouldn't be happening in a therapy, is that the therapy is a contract, right? It's you pay the therapist and the therapist provides a service to you. And in that, gifts really seem to me that they have real no place in that contract. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a bit.
Gifts can seem like a wonderful thing between, a therapist and a client. However, it really does change the relationship because there's this sense of power or this sense of, needing to give gratitude. If the therapist gives the client a gift, then the client feels as though, okay, well, I have to, get them a gift. Right. Or I might feel like I can't cancel an appointment, or I can't, refute against what the therapist says. It really breaks down the boundary, and sometimes clients can be so vulnerable that getting a gift from a therapist may seem like getting a gift from a parent or a friend.
Right.
And some clients can be going through depression or loneliness, and this can seem like you're really this special person, and it really changes what the contract is supposed to be.
When a therapist doesn't give a gift, when that's not a part of the therapy session, then in my mind, it's kind of honoring what you're there to do. It's, the therapist is there to help you get through this difficult time, whatever that is. And the idea of a gift, for me, when I give a gift to somebody, it's because I care about them. They're special to me, and it's something that I want them to have. But for a number of reasons, but also I want them to know that I gave it to them, that I care about. It's a symbol of caring, which.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it's a very personal symbol of caring, which it takes it out of that contract of therapist to client.
It's not. This is not supposed to be your friend. This is not supposed to be your mom. This is supposed to be a mental health clinician that's helping you work through whatever situation. And when you give gifts, it really changes the whole scope of the relationship, and it's just not. It's not appropriate. That is a red flag if you're receiving a gift, to know that territory is changing.
Yes. Now, I do know therapists who are very kind and respectful therapists who have said that a gift could be given under very careful situations, and so long as that there is a discussion around the meaning behind that gift for both the therapist and the client, or that it's not being used by the unethical therapist to ingratiate themselves in some personal way in the client's life. How do you feel about that? I know that some people are on two very different extremes about the notion of gifts.
Yeah, I'm probably on the more extreme side where there should be no gift giving, but I do think if there is, the conversation that you mentioned is really important, just so that it can be clear to the client what that gift means.
And so I guess in that whole sense of gifts, the other thing that shouldn't be happening is that a therapist shouldn't be accepting gifts from their client or asking for monetary favors like the use of their vehicle, or do you know what I mean? Like
yes, no, absolutely.
So it again goes back to the maintaining the structure of the healing relationship and the contract that was made in the beginning, that one person is the therapist and the other person is the client, and that's what's most important for the healing relationship. Well, thank you very much. That was very helpful.
Thank you.
I can't wait to talk to you again.
Thanks so much. Take good care.
Thank you. You too.
Join us every Monday from 2:30 to 4 p.m. for She Boom. Open your ears to the sound of the latest and greatest women in music. Our show focuses entirely on female artists, from a local to global perspective. Every Monday from 2:30 to 4 p.m., tune in to She Boom on CFRO 100.5 FM Co-op Radio.
You're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox. This week we talked a little bit about how traumatic brain injuries, TBIs, can impact on our mental health. And we chatted with a TEL responder about gifts and how they can damage a healthy, healing relationship. If you're interested in more information about Genieve and her transformational coaching, please visit our website. And when you get there, you will find we located the game Rina was mentioning, Super Better, and have put information on there about where you can locate it. So thanks for listening to Both Sides Now here on Co-op Radio. If you have questions or feedback about this program, you can reach us by email at bothsidesnow@coopradio.org or via Twitter at BothSidesNowBC. I'm Bernadine Fox, and we'll be back next week. Until then.
When I've never been further from knowing what the hell I'm gonna do, when I can't seem to find my way under or over or through, just when I'm ready to give up the fight, there you are.
cliche.